It was a chilly evening when Grandma first noticed the wild cat. She had always lived in her cozy house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and fields. For years, her only companions had been the birds in the trees and the rabbits that hopped along the edge of the forest. But this evening, as Grandma sat on her front porch, sipping tea and watching the sun dip behind the hills, something unusual caught her eye. At first, she thought it was just another stray cat, but as it came closer, she realized it was no ordinary animal. This cat had a sleek coat with striking patterns that she had never seen before. It wasn't just the way it looked that made it stand out, but also its movements. It moved like a creature that belonged in the wild, not in someone's home. Its eyes were sharp and focused, and it seemed to be sizing up the situation before deciding whether or not to trust the humans nearby. Grandma was a lover of animals, and despite its wild appearance, she felt an immediate connection. She stood up slowly from her rocking chair and took a few steps toward the cat. To her surprise, instead of running away like most wild animals would, the cat simply watched her, not with fear, but with curiosity. This intrigued her even more. She had lived in this house for many years, and although she had seen various animals in the area, she had never seen a cat quite like this one. Over the next few days, Grandma kept an eye on the cat. It came and went, appearing at odd hours of the day. Sometimes it would sit at the edge of the garden, watching her through the window, its golden eyes glowing in the fading sunlight. Other times, it would disappear into the woods behind the house. But one thing was always the same. It never seemed to stay far for long. It was as if it was drawn to her presence. She began to leave out small bits of food, just to see if the cat would come closer. At first, it was hesitant, sniffing the air before cautiously approaching the food. But over time, it began to eat from the small bowls she left out. And eventually, it would stay long enough for her to watch it eat, its eyes always alert, but its body more relaxed. One day, after a particularly strong rainstorm, Grandma found the wild cat sitting on her doorstep. Its fur was damp, and it looked as if it had been seeking shelter from the rain. Grandma opened the door and looked at the cat with a soft smile. "Come in, little one," she said softly. And to her surprise, the wild cat stepped inside, as if it had been waiting for an invitation all along. From that moment on, the cat seemed to consider Grandma's home its safe place. It didn't act like a typical house cat, but it wasn't fully wild either. It would wander around the house, sometimes jumping up onto the furniture and curling up by the fire, while other times it would disappear into the woods, only to return again later. Grandma began to wonder where it had come from, why it seemed so different from any other cat she had ever seen, and what its story was. Little did she know, this mysterious visitor was about to reveal something extraordinary, something that would amaze both her and scientists alike. Grandma couldn't help but notice just how unique the wild cat was. It wasn't like any stray she had ever seen. Its fur was sleek and smooth, but it had patterns that were almost mesmerizing. The markings on its coat seemed to shift in the sunlight, looking like a blend of shades that were hard to describe, almost as if nature itself had carefully painted them on. It wasn't the usual stripes or spots that she had seen on many cats, but something different, something more exotic. As the days passed, Grandma began to observe more of the cat's unusual traits. It moved with the grace of an animal that belonged in the wild. There was no hesitation in its steps, no awkwardness. Every motion was calculated. Every jump and leap was perfectly timed. The cat would leap onto a tree branch with the ease of a seasoned hunter, pausing for a moment to watch the world below before gliding down as if it was part of the forest itself. But it wasn't just the way it looked and moved that stood out. It was its behavior. Unlike any house cat that would rub up against her legs or purr for attention, this cat didn't seem to want affection at all. It would sit near her, keeping its distance, yet always keeping an eye on her. The wild cat didn't seek out the warmth of the fire or the comfort of the house the way other animals would. It preferred to remain outside, lying in the shadows where it could keep watch over its surroundings. One afternoon, Grandma decided to sit on the porch with a book, hoping the cat might come closer. To her surprise, it did. Slowly, it crept over, its ears twitching as it approached her chair. But instead of sitting down by her feet, it stopped a few paces away and sat, watching her silently. Grandma didn't try to move or speak. She simply let the cat decide when it was ready for closer interaction. She realized that the cat was not like the others. It wasn't looking for comfort or attention. It seemed to be a creature of the wild, one that was wary of humans but not frightened. The cat had an air of confidence that she found both fascinating and a little unsettling. It was as though it understood the world around it in a way that other animals didn't, with a sharpness and awareness that was almost human. But despite its wild nature, there was something in the way the cat looked at her. It wasn't just a casual glance. It was as if it was studying her, understanding her in a way that made her wonder if this cat knew more than it let on. As time went on, Grandma noticed the cat would sometimes follow her around the house, but always at a distance. It didn't pester her like most pets, but it wasn't exactly shy either. Grandma's curiosity only grew as the days went by. She couldn't help but wonder where this cat had come from, and why it had chosen her home. It was unlike any animal she had ever met, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this wild cat than met the eye. Little did she know, this mystery was about to unfold in a way that would leave her, and everyone else, astonished. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Grandma and the wild cat grew stronger, even though it remained a mystery. Grandma had always been a lover of animals, but she had never encountered one quite like this before. The cat, though it kept its distance, seemed to trust her in its own way. It would appear more often, sitting on the porch or in the garden, as though waiting for her to join it. Every now and then, it would even come a little closer, but it still never allowed itself to be touched or held. The cat had become a constant presence in Grandma's life, though it still maintained its wild ways. She didn't mind. It was as if the cat had its own set of rules, and Grandma respected them. She never tried to force the cat to interact with her in a way that was unnatural. Instead, she simply allowed the animal to come and go as it pleased, knowing that if it wanted to be closer, it would choose to be. Despite the wild cat's aloofness, Grandma began to notice something interesting. The cat seemed to have developed a protective streak, especially around her. It wasn't overly affectionate, but if anyone approached the house, the cat would be alert and watchful. It would often follow Grandma around as she worked in the garden, keeping a careful eye on her. If she moved to the front of the house, the cat would quietly follow her steps, staying hidden in the bushes or trees, watching from afar. Grandma couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort from the cat's presence. It was like having a silent guardian nearby. And even though she didn't fully understand why the cat was so focused on her, she felt safe knowing it was there. It was a strange feeling, but a comforting one. One day, as Grandma worked in the garden, she saw something she had never noticed before. The wild cat, instead of simply observing her from the shadows, walked up to her and sat down beside her. Its golden eyes were calm, not filled with the usual suspicion. It sat quietly next to her for a long while, watching her pull weeds from the flower beds. Grandma continued her work, not wanting to disturb the cat, but feeling a strange sense of connection between them. Over time, the cat became more and more comfortable around Grandma, though it still kept a healthy distance. It would occasionally let her catch a glimpse of it lying in the sun, its fur glistening in the daylight, or climbing up the trees, its movements as smooth and silent as a shadow. The cat seemed to enjoy the peace and calm of Grandma's home, and it always returned after its brief excursions into the woods. Grandma began to wonder what had brought this wild creature into her life. Was it simply the calm of her home that had drawn it in? Or was there something more? She still didn't know, but one thing was certain. The cat had found a place where it could be both wild and safe, where it could roam freely yet still return to a place where it was understood. Little did Grandma know, this relationship would soon take an unexpected turn. Scientists had started to take an interest in this unique wild cat, and their discoveries were about to reveal something even more remarkable. But for now, Grandma was content with the quiet companionship of the wildcat, knowing that this creature had become an important part of her world. One afternoon, while Grandma was sitting on her porch enjoying the cool breeze, a car pulled up to her house. It was an unusual sight, as not many people visited her secluded home in the woods. As the car came to a stop, the door opened, and out stepped a man in a dark green jacket and glasses. He looked like someone who had spent a lot of time outdoors, and he carried a small notebook in his hand. He was a wildlife biologist, though Grandma didn't know that yet. The man walked up the driveway and gave Grandma a friendly wave. "Good afternoon, Ma'am," he called out with a smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Grandma looked up, surprised, but she smiled back. "Not at all. How can I help you?" The man introduced himself as Dr. Robert Harris. He explained that he was a biologist working with a team of scientists researching wildlife in the area. They had been receiving reports of unusual sightings, rare animals that had never been seen in this region before, and he was hoping to learn more about the wildlife around Grandma's house. Grandma, though intrigued, wasn't sure what he was after. "Well, I've seen all sorts of animals around here," she said, "but there's one particular cat that keeps coming around. It's a bit unusual, to be honest." Dr. Harris raised an eyebrow. His interest piqued. "Unusual? How so?" Grandma described the wild cat she had been observing. She explained how it was different from any stray she had seen, how it moved with such grace and confidence, and how it seemed to be more than just a normal house cat. She even told him about the way it followed her around the garden and watched her from the trees. Dr. Harris listened intently, taking notes in his notebook. "I've heard rumors of rare species in this area," he said, "but a wild cat with those traits, that's something I'd like to investigate further." He asked if he could stay for a while and observe the cat. Grandma, though not fully understanding why he was so interested, agreed. She had no reason to refuse. The wild cat had been part of her life for weeks now, and if anything, she thought it would be interesting to learn more about it. As they sat together on the porch, waiting for the cat to appear, Dr. Harris explained that he had been studying local wildlife for years. He had worked on many projects related to rare and endangered species, and he had a special interest in wildcats. He told Grandma that he had seen cats with similar markings in other parts of the world, but they were always in remote regions. He thought it was very unusual for such a creature to be living so close to a human settlement. Eventually, after a few hours of waiting, the wild cat appeared from the woods. As usual, it walked cautiously, but with purpose, its golden eyes scanning the area. It stopped near the edge of the yard, noticing Dr. Harris and Grandma sitting quietly on the porch. For a long while, it simply watched them, not moving closer. Dr. Harris stood up slowly, trying not to alarm the cat. He pulled out a pair of binoculars and started to study the animal from a distance. "This is incredible," he murmured to himself. "This is exactly what I've been hearing about." Grandma looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" she asked. Dr. Harris smiled, still watching the cat. "I believe this cat may be from a rare species that's not typically found around here. If I'm right, it could be an extraordinary discovery." Grandma's eyes widened in surprise. She had no idea that the cat could be something so special, but Dr. Harris' excitement was contagious. She couldn't wait to learn more about this mysterious animal that had become such a big part of her life. Little did she know, the wild cat story was about to take a fascinating turn, one that would leave everyone amazed. As the days passed, Dr. Harris became more and more fascinated with the wild cat. He returned to Grandma's house almost every day, sometimes with a colleague or two, to observe the creature from a distance. Each time, the wild cat would appear at its usual spot in the woods, always cautious, always watching. It never let anyone get too close, but it didn't run away either. It was as if it had come to trust Grandma and the scientist, at least to some degree. After a few weeks of careful observation, Dr. Harris made an exciting announcement. He had managed to collect a few hairs from the wild cat without disturbing it too much. With the help of a local lab, he had sent the samples in for genetic testing. The results came back, and they were nothing short of remarkable. Dr. Harris was overjoyed when he discovered that the wild cat wasn't just an ordinary stray or feral animal. It was, in fact, a rare species of wildcat that had been thought to be nearly extinct. The species, known as the northern forest lynx, had been spotted only in isolated regions far away from human civilization. Scientists had lost track of the species decades ago, believing that the last of its kind had disappeared due to hunting and habitat destruction. The discovery of the wild cat living so close to a populated area was nothing short of groundbreaking. Dr. Harris couldn't contain his excitement when he shared the news with Grandma. "You won't believe this, but this cat is a northern forest lynx," he said, almost out of breath. "I knew it was special, but I had no idea just how rare it was." Grandma was stunned. She had always known that the cat was different, but to learn that it was a species believed to be almost gone was beyond anything she could have imagined. "But how is it here? How did it survive all this time?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Dr. Harris explained that it was still a mystery. He theorized that the cat must have found a way to live in the surrounding woods, avoiding human contact for years. The dense forest near Grandma's house provided a perfect environment for a wildcat to remain hidden. It was possible that the cat had been living there for a long time without anyone knowing, quietly surviving by hunting small game and avoiding human interference. What was even more fascinating, however, was the fact that the wildcat had chosen to approach Grandma. This rare species, which had spent so much time avoiding people, had formed a connection with her in a way that no one could explain. Dr. Harris couldn't help but wonder if the cat had recognized something in Grandma. Maybe the peace and solitude of her home, or if it simply felt safe there, free from the dangers that it might have encountered in the outside world. Over the next few days, the wildcat's behavior became even more intriguing. It started to come closer to Grandma, sitting on the porch with her while Dr. Harris took notes. It would even lie down nearby, basking in the warmth of the sun as if it had become comfortable with the idea of sharing its space with her. The more Dr. Harris studied the wildcat, the more he realized that there was still so much to learn. The genetic testing had confirmed that the cat was indeed from a rare and nearly extinct species, but there were so many unanswered questions. How had the cat survived for so long? Why had it approached Grandma? Was it just the calmness of her home that had drawn it in, or was there something more? The discovery had only just scratched the surface of what could be a much bigger story, one that would continue to unravel over time. For Grandma, the news was a mixture of awe and disbelief. She had never imagined that the wildcat she had grown so fond of was anything more than just a stray animal looking for shelter. But now, as she sat with the cat at her side, she couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the mysterious creature that had found a place in her life. And little did she know, this was just the beginning of an incredible journey that would change everything. As the news of the rare wildcat's discovery spread, both Grandma and Dr. Harris found themselves at the center of attention. Scientists from all over the country were eager to learn more about the northern forest lynx, especially after hearing about its unusual behavior and its bond with Grandma. Researchers, wildlife experts, and conservationists reached out, asking for permission to visit and study the cat further. They were all fascinated by the idea that such a rare species had managed to survive in such close proximity to human habitation. For Grandma, the sudden attention was overwhelming. Her quiet life had been turned upside down, and now strangers were coming to her home, asking questions and taking notes. But despite the busy days filled with visitors, Grandma never lost her affection for the wildcat. It remained a constant presence in her life, often sitting beside her as she worked in the garden or watched the sunset from her porch. The cat seemed to have become a part of her daily routine, its quiet company bringing her a sense of peace that she had come to treasure. Dr. Harris continued his research, working alongside other scientists to gather more information about the cat's behavior and its environment. They set up cameras around the property to observe the wildcat when it roamed the woods, trying to learn more about its habits and how it survived. Every day, more questions arose. How had the cat remained hidden for so long? Was there a larger population of northern forest lynxes in the area, or was this the last of its kind? The scientists also began to study the cat's diet, tracking the types of animals it hunted and how it interacted with the local ecosystem. They discovered that the lynx was an incredibly skilled hunter, relying on its sharp senses to stalk small animals like rabbits, squirrels, and birds. It was clear that the cat had honed its skills over many years, adapting to the environment in ways that had allowed it to thrive despite being the last of its species in the region. But the more they learned, the more they realized that the cat's survival might be due to something even more extraordinary. It seemed that the wildcat's instincts were not just shaped by nature, but by its environment. The surrounding forest provided ample shelter and food, but it also seemed to offer a kind of protection, an invisible shield that had allowed the cat to remain safe from the dangers that threatened other species. The wildcat appeared to have found a perfect balance in its secluded world, one where it could live without interference, yet still manage to adapt to the changing world around it. In the midst of all this research, Grandma started to reflect on her own life and the role she had played in this extraordinary story. She had never thought of herself as someone special, just a quiet woman living on the edge of the forest. But now, as scientists marveled at the cat's survival, she realized that her home had become a sanctuary, not just for the wildcat, but for something much bigger. She had unknowingly become part of a much larger conservation effort, one that could have a lasting impact on the future of wildlife in the region. The cat, in its quiet and mysterious way, had brought about change, not just in Grandma's life, but in the lives of everyone who had come to learn about it. The discovery of the northern forest lynx wasn't just about finding a rare species, it was about learning how to protect and preserve the delicate balance of nature. And as more researchers arrived, eager to help safeguard the wildcat's future, Grandma realized that this little wild creature had changed everything. As the research continued, the team of scientists began to form a plan to ensure the lynx's protection. They worked on ways to create a safe, sustainable habitat for the species, hoping that other lynxes might be living in the area, waiting to be discovered. The wildcat had sparked a new hope for conservation efforts, reminding everyone that even in the most unexpected places, nature still had surprises in store. For Grandma, the journey was just beginning. The wildcat had not only become a companion, but had also opened her eyes to the bigger picture, one where every creature, no matter how small or rare, played a vital role in the world around them. As the weeks passed, Grandma's quiet life continued to intertwine with the wildcat's remarkable story. The scientists and researchers who had arrived at her home to study the rare northern forest lynx worked tirelessly, gathering data and creating plans to ensure the cat's protection. They installed more cameras in the woods to track the wildcat's movements and used high-tech equipment to measure its health and behavior. Each discovery seemed to add another layer to the mystery of the lynx and its ability to survive in such an unexpected place. But despite all the attention and research, Grandma remained the one constant in the wildcat's life. The scientists were focused on studying the creature, but it was Grandma who had formed a unique bond with it, one that the researchers couldn't quite explain. She had become the bridge between the wildcat and the outside world, the one who understood its need for space and solitude. And the wildcat, in turn, seemed to trust her more and more with each passing day. It became clear that the bond between them was more than just that of a wild animal and a human. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet companionship that transcended words. Grandma had always been a lover of nature, but having the lynx in her life had given her a deeper appreciation for the world around her. She would often sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching as the wildcat roamed nearby, its movements graceful and silent. It was as if the wildcat had become part of her daily routine, and she had unknowingly become part of its life as well. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, Grandma sat on the porch, lost in her thoughts. The wildcat appeared at the edge of the garden, its golden eyes glowing in the fading light. It paused for a moment, then slowly walked over to Grandma, its body moving with the same fluid grace that had first captivated her. Without hesitation, the wildcat sat down beside her, just like it had many times before. But this time, it didn't stay at a distance. It sat closer, close enough for Grandma to feel the warmth of its presence. For the first time, Grandma reached out her hand slowly, not sure if the wildcat would pull away. To her surprise, the lynx didn't flinch. Instead, it leaned in ever so slightly, as if it had made the decision to trust her. Grandma's heart filled with emotion as she gently stroked the wildcat's fur, her hand gliding over the smooth, sleek coat. It was a moment of quiet connection, one that seemed to bridge the gap between the human world and the wild. The cat's acceptance of her felt like a reward for the patience and kindness Grandma had shown. She had never forced the cat to come to her, never tried to hold it or tame it. Instead, she had simply given it the space it needed, allowing it to come to her on its own terms. And now, it seemed as if the wildcat had finally accepted her as part of its world, as if it had found a place where it could feel safe and understood. As the research continued, the scientists began to focus on the importance of preserving the lynx's natural habitat. They realized that the wildcat's survival depended not only on protection from hunters or poachers, but also on maintaining the delicate balance of the ecosystem. The surrounding forest, with its dense trees and abundant wildlife, was the perfect home for the lynx, and it was crucial to ensure that it remained untouched. The team worked on creating a conservation plan that would help protect the wildcat's home for generations to come. For Grandma, the journey had been one of unexpected surprises and deep connections. She had never imagined that a wild animal would choose her home as its refuge, nor that she would play such a significant role in the preservation of a species once thought to be nearly extinct. But as the wildcat sat beside her, its presence a reminder of the fragile beauty of nature, Grandma couldn't help but feel grateful for the strange, beautiful turn her life had taken. The lynx had shown her that sometimes the most unexpected things could bring the greatest joy, and that nature, in all its forms, had a way of surprising us when we least expected it. As the months went by, the story of the rare wildcat living with Grandma became known far and wide. Researchers, journalists, and wildlife enthusiasts all traveled to Grandma's home, eager to witness this extraordinary discovery firsthand. Scientists from universities and conservation organizations took the lead in the research, but Grandma's quiet, steady presence remained the heart of the story. The lynx had chosen her home, and now it had become a symbol of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. But as much as the attention from the outside world grew, Grandma stayed true to herself. She continued her simple life, enjoying the peace that the wildcat had brought into her home. She had never asked for fame or recognition, and yet she had found herself at the center of something much larger than she had ever imagined. People now came to her not only for the story of the lynx, but also for the lessons it taught about living in harmony with nature. One morning, as Grandma sat on her porch, sipping her tea and looking out at the fields, Dr. Harris visited again. He had some exciting news. After months of research, they had confirmed that the northern forest lynx was not just a rare species, it was a species with a unique role in the ecosystem. The cat's ability to hunt and maintain the balance of small prey populations in the forest had a profound effect on the environment. Its presence had helped to regulate the health of the forest, keeping certain animal populations in check and promoting a healthy, thriving ecosystem. This was a significant discovery for conservation efforts. It showed that preserving species like the lynx wasn't just about protecting the animals themselves. It was about protecting the entire ecosystem they belonged to. The wildcat had a role to play in maintaining the health of the forest, and by saving the lynx, they were helping to protect so much more than just one species. Grandma couldn't help but feel proud. She had always known that the forest was a special place, and now she understood just how interconnected everything was. The wildcat, which had once seemed like a mysterious visitor, was now a crucial piece in the puzzle of the natural world. She realized that her home, once a quiet retreat, had become a sanctuary not only for the lynx, but for countless other creatures that depended on the same forest. The conservation team, inspired by the success of their efforts, began working on a larger project to protect the habitat around Grandma's home. They'd worked with local authorities to set up protected areas in the forest, ensuring that the lynx and other endangered species would have safe places to live without the threat of development or poaching. It was a huge step forward, and it wouldn't have been possible without Grandma's unintentional role in the discovery. As for the wildcat, it continued to roam the forest, appearing on Grandma's porch when it wanted company, but always returning to the woods. The scientists believed it was beginning to breed, and they hoped that in the future, more lynxes would be born and survive in the area. The possibility of reintroducing the species to other parts of the region seemed more real than ever before. Grandma, though still astonished by the journey she had been on, had come to accept the role she had played. She had always loved the forest, and now she was a part of something far greater than she could have ever imagined. The wildcat had opened her eyes to the wonder of nature and the importance of every creature in the world around her. As the sun set on another peaceful evening, Grandma sat back in her rocking chair, the wildcat lying at her feet. She knew that the work was far from over, but she felt a sense of peace, knowing that the lynx's future was secure, and that she had helped make it possible. The forest was still wild, still full of mysteries, and she had become a small part of its story, a story that would continue for generations to come.